Welcome to the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. I'm Greg Schinkel, President of Unique Training and Development and Frontline Leadership Systems. And remember, our purpose here on the podcast is to give you some ideas to get more done with less stress, get results quicker, make projects accelerate. And we also want to bring you a diverse set of guests, and that's what we have for you today. And by the way, our feature today is our new Plant Manager Excellence Program. And this is a program that we run on site for clients if they have a group of plants or production facilities, or we also are running a public workshop that starts in April. So that's the Plant Manager Excellence Program, and you can check it out online at uniquedevelopment.com under the Develop Managers tab. And my guest today is someone who I've known now, I think it's probably getting close to 10 years, Rob Szabo. And what I want to do is, to do justice, I'm going to read Rob's introduction just so that you can get to know him better, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So I've invited a guest who knows exactly what it means to lead a high-stakes, high-energy operation. Rob Szabo is a lifelong learner, a creator, and a seasoned entrepreneur. Today, Rob leads a team of 140 team members at a company called Palasad, and that's a hospitality and entertainment leader with two major locations. Now, you might wonder how hospitality fits in with operational performance, but when you're managing 140 people and taking care of guests in a complex service environment, the principles of engagement and operational excellence are everything. He has a passion for building new businesses and in the real estate development business, and he has an MBA from the Ivy Business School at Western University back in 1994 and a BA in economics from Western University in 1990. Rob, it's great to have you here today.
Greg, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So, Rob is always I find him self-effacing. He has built a tremendous business. I wondered, Rob, if you don't mind, well, first of all, maybe tell people what Palasad is and a little bit of the origin story of how you even got in the entertainment business.
Well, first of all, I'll tell you, Palasad is a spelling mistake. I think back when we were making our laundry list of various names that we could come up with for a new recreation hospitality enterprise, we created these lists, and we'd make short lists and cross them off and move them to the next list and go through. And I think it originally was supposed to be Palisade, and at some point got misspelled. But that has served us really well over the past 35 years,
because
That's hilarious. The lack of definition there has really helped us morph our business over time into various other businesses as the market has changed. Palasad was opened in 1994 as a recreation, basically an upscale bar, restaurant, and billiards concept, and got into the business because my family's been involved in real estate for a very long time. And in 1993, 1994, we had a large tenant who went out of business in one of our properties. And having been a recent graduate from a business school, my parents said to me, "Hey, you're a graduate from a business school now, so why don't you prove that you know something and figure out what to do with this space?" If anybody remembers the early 90s, the economy was terrible, and it was kind of a create a tenant project for let's make a tenant for this space and figure out how to fill it, and then we'll get somebody to take it over in a few years and get back to our other businesses. But it turned out that the concept became popular. And eventually it got to the point where it was a fun business, and it was interesting learning something new. So I think what kept me in the business and what still keeps me in the business is that it was definitely a challenge early on, learning something new, learning a new business, learning how to maximize and make it the most efficient as possible. And so that's where it really started. And then that was in 1994. And in 2000, we opened a second location in London, which again was sort of real estate driven. It was a large bowling alley in the South London area, and we were able to buy it from a multinational company who was looking to get out of Canada at the time, purchased that location and revamped it from a traditional bowling center into really what what is now called the entertainment business, which is restaurant, bowling, recreation, all rolled into one.
Yeah.
Early in the days, people said, "Hey, you're never going to make it because what bowling alley can stay in business without leagues?" And I think in our first year of business, 8 months after we opened, we got rid of all the leagues and just focused on recreational customers. So we were right in line there with the early days of Dave and Buster's and some of the pioneers in the industry. And we brought that concept to Canada, I think, as one of the early adopters of the concept.
Now, I know, and certainly we've had our Christmas parties at your venue. I've done takeout from that. People don't know this, but I was in the youth bowling. I think it was called the Youth Bowling Council, YBC, way back in the day, and I had my little green bowling shirt. I think it's still somewhere in storage with my little badges, when I hit certain scores. That was from another bowling alley. But you're right, a lot of bowling alleys, it was all about the leagues, and you really built this place for families and groups and a fun place to hang out. It's not an easy business. I mean, since then there's been competition, but even you then, I know, spun off and you started an escape room business, or at least a franchise called Escapology. And I wondered, first of all, what prompted you to get into Escapology? Because now you have 2 locations for that business.
And just to clarify, I run that business with my wife, Leah. So we have fun working together on that.
Yes.
And we got into that business because, as in any business, it's important to keep things fresh. And it's important to come up with new ideas, new amenities that your customer can come to you more often for. Yeah. And we found that was a good expansion of our business because it fits well with group events. A lot of group events like to do things together. It's a great team building type of activity. And we were also looking for a way to expand the recreation part of our business. So it's just another time our customers can visit us, and being able to offer different themes of experiences, different escape rooms in the business, basically gives 5 or 6 times that a customer can repeat and come and see us again to do a different experience. It's a great complement to our business, and we've enjoyed that. And it's also a great outlet for my personal creativity. I love building things. I love the process of building things and project management. And there's nothing more fun than building a high-tech puzzle room for a guy like me. I love building them, and then I leave it for somebody else to run them.
Yeah. And I was going to touch on that because if I remember correctly, part of your origin story is because your family were entrepreneurs way back. Correct. And in fact, wasn't it a deli business that was in, for people who are familiar with the London, Ontario region, which is our head office and where Palasad is located, along with the Escapology location that you have in Waterloo, Ontario, which is an hour away from here. One of so you grew up sort of as an entrepreneur. You obviously then, like you said, you came out of school, you had a make a tenant project that turned into Palasad, which is always fun when a business starts off like just, oh, by the way, let's just run a business to use up some of our space that we might have trouble leasing out, and then it turns into a juggernaut. But I've noticed that you, over time, have probably been more involved, and then, like you said, you're now more of like overall sort of new project, sort of visionary. And could you just talk about that journey from like when you used to be more hands-on and now you're a little bit more hands-off, just how you accomplished some of that and what some of those steps were?
Certainly. So if we go way back to the beginning. So I grew up in, as you said, I grew up in the delicatessen business, the hospitality business. And I'm talking about since the time I was 2-3 years old. Wow. So the very original location of our family business, there was a mezzanine in the upper level at the back that had a big window that overlooked the rest of the store. And so I had a daycare. It was basically Rob's daycare back there, where my parents would work in the store. They would hire a babysitter to overlook me while I was up in this room above
watching
the back of the store.
Watching the business. And Rob is an only child, so his parents are very active in this delicatessen. So he's literally part of his job is that person up in the probably a glass window looking down over. Exactly. You see that even today in grocery stores and markets, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Same idea. And so as such, I had a great opportunity growing up to see, what works and what doesn't work about the way that small business and founders can run their business. And like any immigrant family, they are hands-on working 50, 60 hours a week. And it's high energy, high involvement, which is great when you have that kind of drive where someone who, leaves their family, sneaks across the border in the middle of the night to get away from what they're trying to get away from, sacrifices everything to start a new life.
Yeah.
That kind of person has a lot of energy, and we all know them, and they are driven. They are, one person machines. And I think my parents were like that. But that comes with a cost. It comes with a cost of working 6 days a week. Comes with a cost of basically, running through every obstacle, running through every barrier, making people do what you want. And then there are good things that come from that in terms of performance in the short term. There are costs in terms of employee morale, building teams, etc. So by the time I was a teenager, we had been in the delicatessen business, the ladies' wear business, the hair salon business, the fitness club business. And by the time I had been through all of those businesses growing up with parents who had started that and me working in these businesses, I realized, okay, you know what? There's a high cost to this. I'm not sure I can be in a relationship. I can do the things I want to do in my life and do it this way, meaning the way of micromanaging top down all the way, which was the way my parents did things. So that's what led me to go and work for, or to go to apply for an MBA to try to learn other management techniques to facilitate my learning so I could figure out how to run a business in a different way than my parents did. And being an only child, I didn't really have the opportunity to work very much for other businesses.
Right.
So I had to figure out how to do this. So that's kind of the origin story.
I was going to interrupt you though, and I didn't know whether this happened to you because you and I haven't really talked about this. So similarly, my dad had started a business, although it didn't go right back to my childhood. But then I went to business school. I did my undergrad at Ivy, where you did your MBA. And I remember coming out thinking, I'm pretty wise now, especially when you go to a prestigious business school. You kind of come out and they fluff you up and make you think you know everything. And I wondered whether you ever had anything happen after you came out and you were schooled and educated where you thought something was true and then it turned out to not be maybe as easy as it was in a case study in business school. Did you ever have that moment where the truth is somewhere in between doing everything yourself and running it like an executive at a bank or something?
Absolutely. I tell you, I have a great example for you. When I was in the fitness club business, this would have been early 90s. I had, or the mid 90s. I think I was in business school, maybe the summer between years. I came back to manage or at least help manage the family's fitness club business. And we had a great group fitness program and a great group fitness manager who was the key person there who trained all the instructors, who scheduled all the classes, who hired all the people. Wonderful guy named Bill. Bill was very talented, super passionate about his job. So coming back after my first year of MBA, learning organizational management, learning HR, I come back, I look at what's going on, I come up with a plan. So I have a great sit down with Bill. I say, Bill, I've been looking at this, thinking about it. Here's what I think we should do. Bill says to me, goes, oh yeah, all that looks good, Rob. Following week, Bill quits and says, I can't work in this environment anymore. There's too much control, too much top-down stuff going on. I just got to move on to somewhere else where I can feel that I'm contributing better, and exactly that scenario. So, it was definitely a lesson for me in humility, also in approaching things with, I would say, a kid glove, especially when we're dealing with managers of departments who are engaged with what they're doing. And then, it was a lesson for me where I learned, okay, I think something makes sense. It's completely logical to me. It should work beautifully. And, I convinced myself it's going to work. And then naturally, why wouldn't Bill think it's going to work? And, but then what I realized is, you have to win the hearts and you have to win the emotions of the people you are dealing with. And it's not what's most logical and what makes sense. So it's so that is the thing that I learned immediately, and it just and I think there was a thing there where I saw that top down approach of my parents. I saw the logic in the MBA approach, and it made sense to apply it.
Yeah.
Except Bill just didn't see it that way, and then we had to rebuild our program from scratch. Which was a real drag.
It's a painful lesson. Of course, I see you today as you have to me, a well-functioning operation. So I know you took part in a program that I did as well called Strategic Coach. I was in it for 4 years. I think you were in it for a similar length of time, which just gets your mind sort of thinking beyond the business. You have managers. You've embraced a book called Traction, and you go through a lot of that. I'm wondering, before you kind of went in that, maybe between your MBA years and when you got into Strategic Coach, or like, was there a time when you were way more hands-on with running the business? And then what is it that caused you to say, okay, I don't know that I want to be in the day-to-day, because entertainment and a restaurant business, that's very hands-on usually for a lot of owners. And I just wondered when did you decide that you had to get out of essentially being there every day and every hour trying to run everything?
Well, listen, so I think in approaching a new venture, whether it's running a new department, whether it's opening a new business, whatever the new experience, new venture may be, it's important to do this. It's important to overestimate the time that it's going to take, overestimate the energy it's going to take, overestimate the money you need to spend. How much you need to do that, I guess, is a situation specific decision. But when I started Palasad, I was in that business 6 or 7 days a week for 5 years.
Okay.
The reason was I had no idea what I was doing. I had never really been in full service restaurants before. Sure, I had grown up in hospitality. I had worked in other businesses that my family had been involved in, been in the fitness club business. And I thought, hey, you know what? I work with people. I talk to customers every day. I've looked at, the bank statements and looked at cash flow, et cetera. I should be able to do this. But every business is unique. And you don't know what you don't know is the old saying. And that definitely came true. That was definitely the experience with Palasad. So it took me a good 5 years working every day in the business before I felt I could no longer be misled, or I was no longer ignorant of the important concepts, important details of running the business. So I spent a good 5 years in the business. And then in 2020, we purchased another, as I mentioned, a larger second location in South London.
So can I pause you there for a minute, just before you go there? So 5 years, it's funny because we've I think both read the book, I think The Tipping Point, right, where it's like talks about 10,000 hours to master something, which again it's not meant to be a hard and fast rule, but you spent 5 years hands-on learning the business. And again, we talk about managers delegating and empowering and so forth, but it does help to know the business so that the people you're empowering, you know whether they're telling you, I don't know, it's not so much that they're not telling you the truth, but they may not be, you need to know whether they're running the business well or not. So it doesn't sound like you had the same crisis that I had. I was doing everything. I was selling, delivering all the training programs. I was on the road a lot. So I really hit a breaking point. But it does sound like you did, by opening up the second location, that almost created the necessity to start looking at how you'd empower someone else to help run the business. Is that right?
Right, that's true. That's true. So, I spent another at least 3 years after opening the second location, hands-on again, forcing me to be in the second location, letting go of the first location. So that forced me as a person to grow to the point where I started to be able to run certain things by remote control.
Yeah.
And was it all good? No, there was, lots of stuff that fell apart at the first location while I was trying to get my handle on the second. But it did help me get my mind around the processes. Like early on, I still was tempted to do, checklists, have a checklist for everything, and then give that checklist to Greg, because Greg will understand how important this checklist is.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, though, that just didn't work, because what was important for me on my checklist was not important to other people. So, through that process, I did learn the concept of just allowing people a chance to buy in to how the system worked, allowing them to have a say in the system. And those are things I think you talked about strategic coach. And those are things that were valuable in strategic coach, learning how to, involve other people, learning how to take less of a top-down approach and a more collaborative approach. I think it's not a lot different than running a hockey team or running a sports team. At the end of the day, we can't tell the players what to do every minute that they're on the ice.
Right.
And as a manager, we sort of have to resist that temptation, and we have to basically explain the game, teach the skills, explain the concepts of what we're trying to achieve, explain the strategy. And then once they're on the ice, once they're performing their job, we sort of have to let go and let them take the lead. And I think that is kind of the strategy I've taken since running multiple locations, running multiple businesses. And frankly, Greg, my other problem is I get bored relatively quickly. So I can do things for 3, 4, 5 years and be pretty engaged because I'm learning. Yeah. By the end of 4 or 5 years, I need to look for new things. So I need to look at opening a new business or doing a new project, and just to keep myself interested. So I think that it's forced me as a person to then learn how to delegate more. And it's hard to delegate unless you understand yourself.
Yeah.
So my rule is, I delegate what I understand. If I have to do something, if something is repetitive, then I know it's an activity that would be worthwhile delegating.
Yeah.
If I have to do something once a year, I'm not going to delegate it, because it's just more work to teach somebody than the benefit I get. But if I have to do something daily, weekly, monthly, it is something that I actively try to delegate. So my strategy is basically anything repetitive. The more repetitive it is, the more I try to delegate it, and the more and it even comes to important things. I try to, over time, even delegate the important things, as long as it's repetitive and it needs to be done regularly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the aspects in Strategic Coach that I'm sure you remember, as do I, and it was actually quite transformational, I still reflect on it, even though I'm not currently in the program, is the concept of unique ability, which is to say that you have certain strengths and gifts and talents. And just, again, a quick primer, and people can always look into this more. It sounds like we're promoting Strategic Coach. It is a very good program, strategiccoach.com. But, what they talk about is you have this unique ability, which is the core. It's the thing that you love doing, brings you energy, you're quite good at it and effective, adds a lot of value. The next ring out from that unique ability center is your circle of competence, which is the stuff you're good at, but it doesn't really feed your fire. You could do it to make some money, but it's not really juicing you up. And then there's the circle of incompetence, I call it. I'm not sure if that's their term, but it's like the things that annoy you, and anyone watching you would also be annoyed watching you do it. And those are the things that you definitely have to get rid of. So I'm just curious for you, and they do say in Coach that the definition of your unique ability actually evolves over time. I know for me, this is actually part of what jazzes me up, is what I would call curious conversations, is really juices me up. What for you did you determine, or do you think is your unique ability?
Well, I think unique ability is a combination of what you're good at and then what you're passionate about.
Yes.
So I love the project management. I love the strategic firefighting, fixing the problem. I love fixing the problem. When I was a kid, I would love taking apart the lawnmower that didn't work and trying to figure out how to put it back together. So that's a bit of my deal. So, I think my unique ability has evolved into trying to do things other people can't do. So if it's high level integration of people, trying to get people to work together, if it's trying to push through a project so that I can get other people on task, on schedule, those are the things that I like to do. So I love the project management piece. I like the setting strategy part. I'm not much of a rah-rah person, so I wouldn't say I'm great at building culture. So I tend to, right or wrong, delegate a little bit more of the culture piece because I'm not that much of a walk around and shake hands and talk to people all day kind of guy.
Yeah.
And you know, I have found that over time my unique ability has changed. At one time, I could do everything. As I focused more and delegated more to other people, my skills have deteriorated. So my unique ability is much narrower now than it was. For example, over the holidays, I walked into one of our locations and in the afternoon on a Friday, and it was just jamming. And I realized, I said, okay, these guys are in trouble. There's too much going on here. I better help out some way. And then I said, what can I do? And they said, well, you can either make drinks behind the bar. And I said, okay, well, I'm out of practice on that. Is there something simpler I can do? And then so I ended up washing dishes for 3 hours and fixing bowling machines that day. And then I suddenly realized, you know, I have almost become useless because I am now so focused on strategic project management issues that I don't even know how to do the things I used to do 20 years ago.
By the way,
So
I would agree with you that one of the ways I can tell, because we've really built up our team over the last few years, is that
right.
when I don't know what's going on, how it's being done, I just know that it is being done and it's being done well. So there's almost
Right.
like this blissful ignorance. And then, like you said, it's even if I had to step in and do it, I don't think I would know how to do it. Whereas I used to know how to do everything, let's say. So
Everything.
I can agree with you. So I wanted to steer the conversation in a slightly different way because you have created a management team. You have your main leader at each of your locations. You have some sub leaders probably as well because you have so many hours to cover in your business. I'm just wondering. What's your view of developing your managers? How have you helped them basically become more successful?
Well, so you're right, Greg. I've created a leadership team. So on a day-to-day basis, I work with about a half a dozen individuals. So I work with the director of operations who runs our two restaurant entertainment locations.
Yeah.
I work with the manager who oversees our Escapology locations. I work with our marketing team, and I work with our accounting team. So there's about 6 people I work with every day. So I rely upon them to convey our initiatives, our projects to the rest of the managers within our company. So that's typically how it works. It's been definitely a evolutionary process in terms of how we do this. So, like I said, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I would be the person who created the checklist. I would create the system. I would write the how-tos. The difficulty with that, in my example with Bill at the fitness club, is that top-down approach doesn't work unless you're prepared to do the job yourself. If the employees decide not to do it, or if your team decides not to do it.
Well, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna interject that the other thing I guess the other thing it does, which is not intended, is it tends to attract somebody who does need someone else to tell them exactly what to do and when to do it. And so it actually causes you to bring in, and this is a good lesson for any of our audience members, the more you just want to systematize it, make people robots, then you're going to be hiring people that don't know how to show initiative and take ownership. So you actually are sowing the seeds of you having to stay involved.
Right. And that's absolutely true. And if you think about the restaurant business, and there's hundreds of different cocktails. When you look at the menu of a restaurant, there's 100 different items, 50 different items on the menu, and there's thousands of combinations of how orders can be placed by a guest when they come in, what combination they come in. Very hard to systematize that to a high degree.
Right.
So at the end of the day, what we have to do really is train people in the fundamentals. We have to train them on how to do certain things, and then we have to rely upon their judgment how to put it together. So if, unlike maybe a factory where each role is specific, there's a lot of flexibility on how people do their jobs in a kitchen or behind the bar or in the restaurant business, depending on the flow of things and how orders come in. So really, at the end of the day, there's no choice but to try to get a high level of engagement from your employees. So over time, I have tried things like Strategic Coach. It was a wonderful program for me personally, but I found I had difficulty applying it to other people. Then I tried Traction, which is Gino Wickman, and it's a great program for trying to figure out how to engage other people in your company, how to get them to help you with your analysis of your business, analysis of the market, to understand what your strategic focus is in your business, what your marketing focus is, what your key numbers are. That's important. The challenge I had with Traction, I found that what we were doing in terms of those good business activities didn't always translate into profit for me in the bank. So then my final latest spot we're at now with our business is I'm really following, I think, the principles of the great game of business.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another similar to Traction, but it's more of an open book management program based on sharing information, sharing the results of the company with your key employees, and then part of their compensation is paying them bonuses based on the profitability of your business.
Yeah. And actually, so just to say that, I've been impressed. Well, first of all, I think people can pick up, and this is another good side lesson, which is not being directly stated, but it's a good one for people to take away, is that you can hear that Rob, and I've gone through it in our evolution of a business, is you go and seek different solutions, and you might get some that you take out of your schooling. You sign up for another program and it gives you something, but maybe not everything. You evolved it again to a few different times. You're still actually bringing in experts as needed to help supplement what you're doing. You're involved in industry groups. I know you've trusted us with a couple of your people to give them some basic leadership skills. So I see that, and now, and honestly, because the other thing I'll say is that Rob and I have been in the same, we call it a personal advisory group I've been in it for probably 30 years since I took the business from my dad, but certainly you've been in it for more than 10, maybe 15 years. And what I've noticed is that you have, by saying you're going to go with an open book and basically show people the financials in the business, that scares a lot of people. But I think the thinking is that unless they know what really is going on, they can't really help you run it better. And so, kudos for you, first of all, for being willing to take those, I guess, risks and seeing the benefit of it, but also not being so invested in it that you wouldn't consider changing it again if you had to.
Right. So as I said, this is the point we're at now. It's the iteration of the management system we're at now. It seems to work. It definitely works when your business is growing and the times are good. Yeah. So as we know in Canada at the moment, we're under some economic pressure, particularly in Southern Ontario, with manufacturing being in a bit of a slump the way it is. And that translates into just general consumer demand. So this is our first experience, I think, running the system, this profit sharing open book management system in a declining economy, or a let's call it flat economy. Yeah. And I think it's still worthwhile because the lessons of the past few years, and one thing running open book is not just about sharing the numbers, it's teaching people what the numbers mean. Right. It's teaching them how we come up with the numbers. It's teaching them about all the mysteries that are that are part of the financial statement and part of the performance numbers of your company. And it's teaching them the concept of, the numbers, the financial statements, the metrics of your business, they tell a story. Yeah. So if you look at the goal we've set for the number of customers coming in per week, and then you look at the actuals that come in per week, that tells you a story of how busy you are in your business.
Yeah.
And then, it translates what they see in terms of customers sitting in chairs into a number on a piece of paper. And that translates through everything in your business. So I do find that there is value in the open book concept because it forces us as owners, managers, leaders to educate and grow our employees so they understand what's happening. So that's the real value in it, I think, is it forces the leadership to teach and to grow. I always tell our managers now, I said, listen, you're not just learning the restaurant business. We're teaching you business.
Yeah.
We're teaching you how to run any business.
Yeah.
And that's valuable for the rest of your careers because you could walk into a print shop, a factory, whatever, look at a financial statement, look at cost of goods, look at inventory, and understand what's happening. So that, and I think as our managers spend more and more time in that environment, they begin to appreciate that it's the power of knowledge that's theirs once they learn it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way as we're coming to the close of our interview. The one thing, as you mentioned it, our new Plant Manager Excellence program, which is really for site leaders, even teaching financial acumen. It's been surprising as we've done it with some groups how little sometimes they know about how the levers that they might be pulling on a day-to-day basis, how it drives performance. And another client who's really interested in high performance work systems, which is today's rebranding of self-directed work teams, has also acknowledged that if you don't teach the people about the business, they don't know about the decisions that they're making and what the ramifications are on the numbers. And if they don't know that, then either makes the most senior leader have to make all those decisions. So you've really co-opted your leaders into understanding, like, what is it that drives our numbers? And the other thing, I think probably people realize this, but the thing about the entertainment business is there's a lot of labor involved. And so by having the managers being more aware that if we have less foot traffic and we don't have as many customers, that's when we have to look at labor control. And if you don't sort of, put your labor up when you're busier to ensure service, or decrease it to make sure you're not spending too much and losing money. I mean, those are all valuable lessons. So I did want to give you the chance that we've covered so much good ground. This has been a little MBA course, I think, for many business leaders. Was there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up?
Well, I would say that in trying times, I think it's always tempting to take a top-down directive approach. And that's great, I think, in the times of crisis when it's over a short term. I have just found that over the long term, when you're trying to have a long-term growth, you're trying to teach teams to be independent, it really becomes important to explain the why in your business. So why do we need to do this? Why is this number important? And then get down to the how to do it. Yeah. But I think the number one thing is trying to explain the why things need to happen a certain way, why it's important to the business, why it's important to the job, why it's important to others, and that seems to be the big lesson I've taken away from the past number of years. Is it's not how to get to the number, it's why do we need to get to that number, and that seems to be the big thing that drives independent performance instead of just people waiting for instructions.
Yeah, you got it. This has been awesome. And anybody who's been through our frontline leadership would recognize the explaining why as one of the key things that people usually take away from it. Although you have to keep reminding yourself that if somebody's not doing something, they may not understand why them not doing it, like why that's a problem and what to do about it. So, Rob, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise. I said this to Rob before we started recording, I've always found him to be super impressive and amazing, but he kind of is a very relatively humble guy, I find. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Well, let me tell you one final thing, Greg. I will say we've had 3 or 4 employees take your frontline leadership course.
Yeah.
And it's always with these great employees who have challenges, especially with their interpersonal leading of teams.
Yeah.
And they always come away mentioning how great your course is, how much they benefited from it. And I can see the difference in them. In fact, one of them I wrote in her Christmas card this year. I did my little thank you. And one of them I wrote, hey, I want to thank you so much for being nice to this other person this year, because it really has made a big difference. Coming away from your course, they realized the impact that they had on other people. So I think your course is invaluable and as a leader, I can't tell people like why they need to change, because they think I have a vested interest, and of course I'm going to tell them. Yeah. But when they hear it from, from their peers, from a program like they're in, in your courses, I think it makes a huge difference. So it was totally worthwhile.
That's so great that you offered this and seriously non-solicited testimonial. So thank you for that. Remember, if you want to know more about Palasad or reach out to Rob, palasad.com is the website. Thank you again, Rob. And thank you for giving your time to the podcast. Now, in this world where we're flooded with podcasts, and admittedly, I'm not a celebrity, I'm not a stand-up comedian, although I pretend to be sometimes, the reality is that podcasts get better known by people sharing them and going on. And I know it's a pain to go on the platform and give a rating, but if you share this with somebody who you know needs to hear this message, just like Rob said, sometimes it's better when it comes from a third party. And so please go ahead and do that. And of course, if we can help you or your organization get better, reach out to us at uniquedevelopment.com.